I call to order the regular board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. Tonight is Thursday, November 18th, and it's 6 p.m. Would you call the roll, please, Mary Ann?
Commissioner Bendy?
Here.
Commissioner Bowe?
Here.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Commissioner Hulting?
Here.
Commissioner LeDuc?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Grau?
Here. Does anyone have anything to amend, add, or delete to the current agenda? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone logged in the audience yet?
No.
Okay, we'll move on to approval of minutes. I move to approve the regular board meeting minutes of Thursday, October 21st, 2021, and Thursday, October 4th, 2021. May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, they pass. We'll move to report of park officials. The president has nothing to say at this point. Attorney Amber, do you have anything?
Yeah, so Dirk wanted me to mention the, I'm sure some of you have heard that OSHA had the emergency temporary standard. Typically what would happen is that Illinois would then adopt something similar to for public or government entities. Since the OSHA standard has been stayed pending the appeal in the Fifth Circuit, I think, we're not, there's some time before we have to start really talking about adopting some type of COVID vaccine policy to fit whatever the Illinois OSHA adopts. So that's the attorney report.
Can I ask, is that separate than the preschool?
Yeah, yes, it
Yeah.
is. The preschool still is in effect. Sorry, Amber, I jumped in.
Oh, sorry. The preschool was a governor's order. This is the federal standard that Biden had set for employers over 100 or employers of over 100 employees. Since Illinois has its own OSHA, they're then required to adopt a standard that is similar or more restrictive than the OSHA temporary standard. But because there's the appeal, it's currently stayed. So we're sort of in limbo as to what type of policy the Park District will need to adopt, if any.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, and now for the executive director, Gail.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Amber. You cut out half of my report that I was going to give, so that's great. So in just keeping with the COVID-19 topic, the administrative team and Jennifer Myers is on tonight and is our safety coordinator. We have been meeting, discussing the order, and even though it's stayed at this point because it's tied up in the courts, we did learn where it did not affect public entities before, it was just private companies. It appears it is now going to be affecting all public agencies. So we have started to prepare behind the scenes for policies and procedures. Paderma's put things out. We've talked to Dirk. Once we are notified, if the suspension is lifted, if that's the way it goes, then we'll get further guidance and we will be prepared to implement it just like everything else that we have been faced with. So just wanted to mention that. The other thing is this week I received a request to meet to negotiate the wage reopener agreement between the district and SEIU Local 73. This is a standard bargain to include wages, hours, and terms. So anything that we bargain will be brought to the board, any proposals or changes to the current agreement prior to us agreeing to the wage reopener. So basically it opens up every year and we negotiate the wages with the union. And for the board that got seated in May, just as a reminder, and I know we discussed this as well in the past, but as a reminder, our current agreement, it was approved April 23rd, 2021, and it goes through February 15th, 2024. And the other topic I wanted to bring up is the Oakton public engagement process. The surveys continue to be turned in and tabulated by the data company. Paul Hanley then will analyze and present the results to the task force, the board, and the staff. The hybrid poll began last weekend, is scheduled to go for about a week, and that's, as a reminder, that's the phone and the email survey. So 2 different surveys out there. As of yesterday, we had 1,700 responses to the mail-in survey, which is wonderful. It's about 10% of those sent out to registered voters. The consultant said that he usually hopes for 8 to 17%, but with the size of our community would have been happy with 8%. So we've already surpassed that. So that's great news. The task force will meet November 30th, which is the week after Thanksgiving, at Tuesday, and then that same week we'll present the results to the board at the December 2nd meeting. And Jim Hobart, who is the pollster, will be presenting those results, and then Paul will also be with him on the 16th to answer any questions. The board is, of course, always welcome and encouraged to come to the task force meeting as well if you want to hear the results at the same time that the task force is hearing them, and listen into that meeting. So we hope to have a recommendation for the board from the task force on the 2nd, and then the board can discuss next steps. So any questions on my verbal reports or anything else?
Gail, did you want us to RSVP to that meeting? Or Marianne, did you want us to RSVP?
Yes, please. Because we're getting, yes, that would be good.
Is that virtual or is that, Gail, is that a virtual meeting? Or
No,
in
that's
person?
in person. Yeah, that's in person.
Okay, thank you.
That'll be over, that'll be at O'Connor.
Day and the time again?
November
That meeting?
30th and
Yeah.
7 o'clock,
That's-
Margaret, 6:30.
6:30?
I guess I don't know what time.
Is that what you say?
6 o'clock. Yeah.
6 o'clock. 6.
It's
All right.
Tuesday,
Thank you.
November 30th. Thank you. That's all I have.
Were there questions about the marketing or HR report? I hear none. I'm freezing, so I hope I don't get lost. If I do, carry on. Next, we turn it over to Finance. Commissioner Tunnell, you're around.
Thank you, President Grau, for that nice introduction. And I would like to turn the floor over to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Thank you, Commissioner Tunnell. The written finance report begins on page 13 of the board packet. Because we have quite a lot to cover this evening, my report's going to be abbreviated. The main highlight impacting the monthly report by funds is that in October, we've caught up with our property tax receipts as projected. And we're now on track for an estimated year-end operating surplus greater than what we had budgeted, as we'll be presenting when we go through the proposed budget. If anyone has any questions on the written report or the financial reports, I'd be happy to answer them now. Hearing none, I will turn it back over to Commissioner Tunnell.
Thank you for that abbreviated report. I have a suggested motion. I move to approve for payment vouchers in the total amount of $483,667.63. I have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, may we have a call for a vote, please?
Commissioner Bendy,
Still muted, yes, yes. Yeah,
Commissioner Bowe,
sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
Commissioner Hulting,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau.
Yes.
Thank you. And now I'd like to yield the floor back to Superintendent DeAngelis for the 2022 proposed operating budget presentation.
Thanks, Commissioner Tunnell. I think Margaret's going to give me the screen so I can share the presentation. And while she's doing that and I'm getting it ready to roll, April's going to introduce some members of her team.
Yes, thank you. Before the staff turns off their cameras for this presentation, I just want to introduce the managers who are on the line here. They play a major role in researching and preparing their areas of responsibility along with their direct supervisors. And they're here to assist in answering any specific questions that you might have. So we have Brent Dolan, the Oakton Facilities Manager, Jennifer Myers, the Centennial Activity Center Manager and the Safety Coordinator, Julie Grieve, the Recreation Programs Division Manager, Justin Schuring, our Centennial Fitness Center Manager, and Ethan Williams, our Aquatics Manager. So we welcome and thank all of them for their hard work on this.
Thanks, April. Okay, now can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. And we are tonight going to look at the operating budget portion of our budget presentation. Again, I'd like to start out with the timeline. And as we talked about at the last meeting, remind you that the timeline is designed to approve the budget as early as possible in the budget year, while providing staff with sufficient time in 2021 to prepare the proposed budget. As you can see, we have on the schedule the board's adoption of the Truth in Taxation resolution. Tonight's Truth in Taxation resolution vote will indicate whether the tax levy as presented at the November 4th meeting is what you would like in the tax levy ordinance to be adopted in December. So in order to accomplish this timeline, we'll also need direction from the board regarding any changes to what we've proposed at the board meeting on December 2nd, which is our next board meeting. We will provide responses to questions and requests for additional information related to the proposed budget as soon as we get those, so that the board can provide direction at the December 2nd meeting. Specifically, we'll be looking for agreement regarding proposed fee changes, the employee compensation increases, and capital fund projects. As a reminder, the tax levy ordinance must be filed with the county by the last Tuesday in December, which is December 28th. Does anyone have any questions regarding the timeline? Okay, with that, I'd like to give you an overview of the 2022 strategic plan. As a reminder, the strategic plan consists of 5 core areas, which are the focus of the Park District. Those are exceptional customer experiences, financial sustainability, operational excellence, employee development and retention, and infrastructure and capital management. So a copy of the detailed plan has been provided for you in the 2022 proposed budget document. Each core area contains long-term goals, strategies to achieve those goals, and then annual tactics that are derived from each department's annual work plans. While our overall goals in each area are long-term, and as a result of that, they don't change often, we do adjust or add strategies as needed. So for example, in the employee core area this year, we made expanded strategy 1 to be broader, and we added strategy 5 based on new needed focus. Does anyone have any questions regarding the strategic plan?
Sandra, I'm just going to throw in, this is Gail, that for the board, we're going to try to get through like each section like this and then ask if there's any questions. So if we can try to hold the questions, it might help us with the flow of the presentation. If that's okay, we'll try that.
Okay, this is Cindy. So we're not going to go through this strategic plan, just the changes?
Yeah, we usually highlight that and have the board review it in the packet, is what we've done the last couple of years, but we can certainly, you know, I don't know if the board wants to go through the entire document, but you can change that process if you want.
No. I think you usually just had the whole thing with just a highlight of what was different.
Yeah. So this was pulled from it, and these are the only 2 things that are different. 3 things, three items.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on if that's all right with everyone.
Okay, can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
So you made a change to the employee section and that was it?
This is Margaret. Every year we develop new tactics though, and those aren't in that overview strategic plan document. Those are in the tactic document, and we usually don't go over those in detail here because when, say, Terry, me, or April are presenting our sections, we do go over the items that we're highlighting in our areas, and those are really derived from those tactics of the strategic plan. So you hear them later in the budget presentation. This is the only thing that had changed really with strategies.
Okay.
Thanks, Margaret and Cindy. So as we mentioned, the detailed strategic plan, which includes those tactics, is included in that proposed 2022 budget document. The document's posted on the district's website, as well as the budget presentation from the November 4th meeting. And this presentation will be posted there as well. And this slide shows where you can find that on our website. So the purpose of our presentation this evening is to present a high-level overview of the proposed budget with the focus on the most impactful operating areas for which you'll be providing us direction. So in case you haven't had a chance to review the budget document, I want to spend a little time explaining how the budget is built and what is entailed in the almost 300-page proposed budget. So to do that, we're going to review the different levels of detail contained in the proposed budget document. The document contains a number of levels of detail, summary reports by account, summaries by function, fund summaries, as well as the detail reports by budget line item. So we'll go through samples of these detail levels. So this is a sample of the detailed reports from our financial software system, and this is all included in that proposed budget document. It's the most detailed level and reflects each line item input into the budget planning module. So this example includes positions, hourly rates of pay, hours per day, days per week, number of weeks, and number of employees to determine these part-time salary budgets at the fitness center. That information then rolls up into the summary report by account for this area, which provides totals by general ledger account number. And then each general ledger account is then incorporated by category into the expense summary for this cost center. Likewise, the different areas are all combined to ultimately result in the total summary for each fund. And as we were looking at examples from the fitness center, they would roll up into the recreation fund summary. Since the budget controls how spending occurs throughout the district, I'd now like to review the structure of how we account for the funds. Tonight, we're going to be reviewing both the general and the recreation funds. At the previous board meeting, we covered the proposed tax levy revenues, which contribute to funding these accounts, as well as proposed spending for the capital projects fund. So this slide shows the accounting fund structure, and the funds highlighted in blue each have a separate tax levy extended for those specific purposes. The funds highlighted in pink are recreation cost centers for which we charge fees. I'll remind you, park districts are unique among government entities in that we have this diversity of revenues among property taxes and fees for services. And you can see here that the capital fund, get my pointer working here, does not have any tax levies associated with it. But I will point out that the tax levy for limited bonds in the general fund provides for the principal and interest payments for bond issues. And when we issue bonds, the proceeds of those bonds are recorded in the capital fund. Now we come to an overview of the budget numbers across all funds. We're comparing our 2021 year-end estimate to our 2022 budget. And in the 2021 general fund, we are projecting a surplus. In the 2021 budget, we anticipated that the general fund would break even. So these results are expected to be better than budgeted, driven largely by lower than budgeted expenses in supplies, contractual services, utilities, and unemployment expenses. And the surplus here in the 2021 recreation fund shows the initial recovery from the pandemic and that impact on the recreation fund. So we do anticipate being able to transfer $528,000 to the capital fund, subject, of course, to the final audit and our final year-end results. The 2022 budget budgets a drawdown in fund balance in the general fund. So in 21, we also budgeted to draw down fund balance because we generated a surplus in 2020 due to lower operations due to the pandemic. However, because our year-end projections indicate an estimated surplus, we are now planning to, again, attempt to draw down in 2022 to move the fund balance toward the retention level of 2 to 4 months of expenses. The drawdown of the general fund balance is offset by a surplus in the recreation fund and still results in sufficient surplus in the recreation fund to estimate a $326,000 transfer to the capital fund, while also increasing the recreation fund balance. So here I want to highlight some of the major areas of expense increases compared to the 2021 budget related to increasing labor costs. And we talked a lot about this at our last meeting, again, compared to the 2021 budget, full-time salaries are increasing about $366,000 and part-time wages about $340,000. And we've estimated increases because of additional full-time positions in staffing benefits as approximately $39,000. This chart highlights how the district's sources of revenue are diversified, comparing the 2022 budget to the 2021 budget. And these are revenues excluding bond proceeds. As our operations are expected to continue to improve coming out of the pandemic, total budgeted revenues are expected to increase by 6.7%. They're driven by increased operations. Approximately 47% of the district's non-capital revenues are budgeted from fees, and about 46% comes from taxes. With grants, donations, miscellaneous revenues, such as interest expense, affiliate, and liquor permit fees making up the remaining percentage. And in 2021, about 46% came evenly from fees and taxes. So to further detail how these revenues break down, this chart depicts how recreation fees and charges are distributed across the activities that we offer. So as you can see, the largest piece of the pie is attributable to property taxes, and after that are recreation programs. But if you look at all the recreation fees, they're kind of a little bit more than the property tax pie. So similarly, the breakdown of expenses identifies that the general government accounts for the largest portion of expenses. This area includes administration and park services, which is responsible for maintaining the buildings and grounds of the district. And the next largest percentage is our capital expenses, followed by recreation programs, which is in line with the revenue pie in this area. So all of that is what I like to call the budget overview. So at this time, I would ask if anyone has any questions about all of that information that I just covered.
Hi, this is John. I do have a quick question. Under the previous slide, it showed other tax or replacement taxes. Could you just explain what that is, please?
Sure. We get from the state distributes, it's called personal property replacement taxes. It's a corporate tax that at some point in history replaced personal property taxes. So it is, again, a corporate tax, and it's distributed to local tax government taxing bodies by the state.
Thank you. I couldn't remember that.
You're welcome.
I had a question,
Uh-huh.
Cindy. So this year's transfer to capital is about $500,000, right?
I'm crossing my fingers. Yeah.
And next year's is budgeted to be only 326,000.
Yes. And I would point out that in the 21 budget, we did not anticipate a sufficient surplus to make a transfer.
Right. I guess my point, I guess there's two things. I know that you usually outperform that number, but I just want to make the point that that is a big difference, and even though it looks like we'll be able to offer more programs next year, looks like our margins are going to be a lot tighter. Is that correct?
I think that's fair. And, I think as we looked at the capital fund projections, it's also important to point out that, here our projection, the fund balance is 344,000. We do, anticipate based on timing that we would expect to do another bond issuance in early 2023. But when we looked at the projections with the capital needs that we've identified, that draws down again pretty quickly in the next couple of years. So it is really important that we continue to be able to make these pay-as-you-go fund transfers to invest in our capital assets.
I think, Sandra, this is Gail. Cindy, to add to that, one of the biggest driving factors, and Sandra can jump in, but we had a lot of open positions, if you can remember, that we are filling or we had filled this fall. And then all of the wage increases in the minimum wage are affecting, the ability to transfer. And that is an estimate, as Sandra said, for the end of this year. We're hopeful it's going to be that, and that would be great news. But we've also held a line on, other things. And the wage, I think it's mainly the wages, the minimum wage, the increase in wages we're having to give because of market, and these positions that we held open that we're seeing all those expenses next year.
Correct.
Right. Big changes.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So, yeah, it just looks to me like this might have been a hard budget to put together. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Never easy. But yes, I would agree with that. Any other questions on the overview?
This is Commissioner Coyne. I'm having a little difficulty seeing. Of course, if I turn my head around, I can see the thing plain as the nose on your face. But I have a little trouble seeing some of the numbers, and my screens are not coming up yet here in the office. So can you tell me what the projected property tax revenue is for 2022? I know it's in these documents, but that you used in the budget, but I can't see it. So I'm just going to ask you if you could tell me what that is.
Just for property taxes, the total including debt service? Yeah.
The same number that relatively the same number that you gave us this morning on the table for the property taxes received for those years.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say here we're showing 8,300,000, but that does include those replacement taxes. So if you bear with me one moment, I can pull up the little property tax amount. Sorry, I pulled up the wrong file.
It's not terribly important. I suppose I can run with the.
No, it's okay. I have it. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is readily accessible. I'm going in the all funds table and
for the record, I tried.
total.
Yeah, for the record, I tried to get everything, all my questions asked prior to the meeting, and I apologize. That was the one thing I forgot. So I apologize to you right now.
Okay, the 2022 budget number of total property taxes is $7,976,323. And again,
Thank you very much.
The budgeted amount is it includes the assumption for new property and the CPI. You're welcome.
Good.
Okay, so now we're going to drill down into the general fund. We'll be highlighting the Park Services area of the corporate taxing fund as it accounts for the largest portion of spending in the general fund. But first, we're going to take a look at the overall trends related to this fund, the recreation fund, and the operating fund. This slide shows the general fund historical revenues compared to expenses for the past 5 years, our estimated 2021 performance, and the proposed 2022 budget. Revenues are depicted by the blue bars, and expenses are depicted by the orange bars. So in 2016 and 2017, when expenses were higher than revenues, we were drawing down our fund balance according to policy. In 2018 through 2020 resulted in a surplus. 2020's large estimated surplus is due to the expense control in this area to offset the drastic reduction in revenue in the recreation fund due to the pandemic. Now, in the 2021 budget, as I mentioned, we budgeted to begin drawing down this fund balance to adjust for the imbalance that occurred in 2020. However, estimated 21 results indicate sufficient surplus to transfer to the capital fund. So in the 2022 budget, we anticipate rebalancing by drawing down fund balance. So that's why you see higher expenses than revenues. And I'll explain that a little more on the next slide. So we've looked at all the numbers of all three combined funds as a whole and the historical revenue and expense trends. This shows the bottom line for the general fund compared to the district's fund balance retention level. So the bars are showing, the blue bars are showing the actual fund balance amount corresponding with the left axis, and the orange line is showing the fund balance as a percentage of expense, which the percentage corresponds to the right axis. The district has adopted a fund balance policy, which requires that the operating fund maintain a fund balance, which is a minimum of 2 months or 17% and a maximum of 4 months or 33% of expenditures. So this shows here, as we talked about earlier, how we were drawing down the fund balance in the general fund according to this policy. And since drawing it down, the intention was to maintain a stable level of around 25% or 3 months of expenditures. However, due to the uncertainty surrounding the pandemic when it hit in 2020, we did not transfer excess fund balance to capital in 2019, nor in 2020, as this ultimately was used to offset the loss in the recreation fund. And then again, the 2022 budget begins to draw down this fund balance. Because the individual fund balances, if you think back to the chart I showed that showed the different tax levies, there's a fund that goes with each of those. Those individual fund balances have to be used for those specific purposes for which it was levied. That's why the drawdown of the fund balance occurs over time to make sure that we have things all lined up. So now we're going to take a look at the overall trends of the recreation, sometimes also called the special revenue fund because it includes these other revenues other than taxes. The special revenue fund includes the recreation taxing fund, as well as the various cost centers under it, which do not rely on tax levy revenues. It also includes the museum taxing fund related to the nature center, and the special recreation taxing fund for activities related to the Maine Isles Association of Special Recreation, which serves our community with special needs. So similar to the general fund, this chart shows the recreation fund revenues and expenses trends historically. Now here you can see the drastic reduction in revenues due to the pandemic in 2020. And also in 21, we're at a much lower level than pre-pandemic years. But as you can see, in 2022, we're budgeting for both revenues and expenses to return more to the pre-pandemic levels. And this also reflects the declining fund balance. Again, the blue bars are fund balance. So you can see how we dropped off in the recreation fund as a result of the pandemic. However, we have been maintaining our targeted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. So we expect to end 2022, the budget projects at about 4 months of expenses after transferring projected surplus to capital. So now we'll take a look at how the general fund and the recreation fund combine to comprise our operating fund. So again, taking a look at the whole fund structure, the operating fund is the general fund and the recreation fund combined, with the exclusion of the debt service fund and the capital projects fund. So this chart shows the various categories of operating expenses. At the last meeting, we looked at this breakdown related only to the general fund, while this pie includes the recreation fund. So the biggest expenses, again, are related to personnel, which total 64% of operating expenses, including the full-time salaries and wages, part-time wages, program instructors, employee benefits. In this chart, you can see how historically our operating fund revenue has exceeded expenses. Even when they're close, the blue bar is still higher than our red bar here. And as a reminder, in 2019, the revenue in excess of expense of about $1 million was not transferred to the capital fund due to the uncertainty posed by the pandemic. You can see the deficit in 2020, where the revenues are slightly lower than expenses. And the 2021 estimated and 2022 budget bars show that a surplus is expected, which is planned to be transferred to the capital fund to continue the district's investment in its assets. So here you can see that our fund balance has been relatively stable through 2018. And 2019, again, reflects the impact of not making that transfer to capital. This 2019 increased fund balance also helped absorb the impact of the 2020 deficit due to the pandemic. And the projected 2021 fund balance retention level is higher than policy, again, reflecting the better than budgeted projections for year end. And as we discussed in the general fund section, the 22 budget begins to draw down this fund balance. And while the projected 2022 fund balance retention level remains higher than the policy, it is expected to decline to the 4 months of expenditures retention level by 2023. So another thing I'd like to point out is that as expenses are increasing, the retention level declines, even while fund balance remains the same, because that denominator is growing. And before we look at more details in the various operational areas, I'd like to review another high-level view of all of the funds. So instead of comparing the proposed budget to the 21 year-end estimates, like we did earlier here, we're going to look at how this proposed budget compares to the 2021 budget, which was prepared in anticipating a great deal of uncertainty due to the pandemic. So what I'd like to highlight here is that our 2022 budget reflects both higher revenues and expenses than budgeted in 2021 in both the general and recreation funds. The increased expenses in our budget and the need to continue to invest in our capital assets are the biggest reasons for our recommendation to incorporate the CPI and the tax levy. And I also want to highlight the large difference between the revenues and expenses in the capital fund. And again, that's due to the timing of our bond issuances. And like I mentioned, we would anticipate the next bond issue to be in early 2023. So now that you've seen the overall picture of the budget and the fund balance impact, we would like to review some of the details behind it. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds, Terry Wolf, to review the Park Services area, but I forgot to put in my notes that I should ask you now if you have any more questions about the overviews.
Okay, go Jen.
Sorry, I was probably, so, when I look at the projection for 2022 with the bar graph, and it seems to pretty much be taking things back to 2019 levels. I was kind of wondering, like, with the basis of getting back to that point, is that kind of based on the trend you've seen over the course of this year, particularly in, with recent registrations for programming, or like what's the basis?
April, can you help me with that? Because I think that is mostly in your area.
Yeah, I think we'll go over those on the detailed slides in the recreation area. So maybe once we get through those, if you have any additional questions, there's some areas that, go back to normal or close to normal, and then others that don't. So I highlight that throughout the presentation.
Okay. Yeah.
And I guess I would add that the general fund is not completely not impacted, because as we talked about on the expense side in particular, with returning the vacant positions, that helps bring those expenses up to more like pre-pandemic levels.
Thank you.
So now I will turn it over to Terry. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.
give everyone one last second to see if there's any other questions on the everything that Sandra just covered.
Oh, thank you, Terry. I did kind of run over that, didn't I?
That's okay. All right, well, I'm not hearing or seeing anybody, but if you're just having trouble with your mic, break in and cut me off anytime. Park Services covers the majority of non-capital expenses that are incurred by the Buildings and Grounds Department. As you can see here, there's a proposed increase of approximately $230,000 over the 2021 budget. I do want to note that there are other accounts throughout the facility budgets that do include maintenance line items for various facility needs that we always work closely with the recreation management team to plan and budget for. The Park Services budget includes all the building expenses for Wohlers Hall, Hockey, O'Connor, the Hinckley Garage, and South Park, and certain building expenses for Main Park and the Activity Center. As you can see, the major driver of the budget increase in Park Services is full and part-time salaries and wages. Approximately $20,000 of this is related to part-time increases in wages from the $11 of minimum wage now to $13 an hour in 2022. We found this year it was challenging to recruit and retain staff at the minimum wage level this year. So we had to make some mid-season adjustments to retain staff and to keep them above this minimum wage. That's part of our decision in this area. Approximately $210,000 of this is related to full-time budget positions that were not budgeted in 2021, as well as some changes in how we allocate for the payroll in certain positions, such as they would have previously had a portion of their wages allocated to a recreation account, and now they're in this area in the general fund. So with salaries and wages being the largest impact to Park Services, and since we've got several new board members, I thought it'd be a good idea to highlight some of the reorganizational changes that were made in 2020 that carried through 2021 and now impacts the 2022 budget. This organization chart for the Buildings and Grounds Department in 2020, pre-pandemic. So as you can see, there were some positions highlighted in green. Through attrition, we had 2 vacant positions when the pandemic hit. Those positions, as I said, highlighted in green are the Assistant Superintendent and a Park Maintenance 1. Then we had 2 more staff leave during the early stages of the pandemic. This was the Mechanical 4-person system and the Facility Maintenance 2 position. These vacant positions allowed us to reorganize the department and reduce the headcount by 1 managerial position, which helped us to save approximately $50,000 annually. In 2021, to ensure we were operating as financially lean as possible, 2 positions were planned to be left vacant for the entire year. 1 additional was budgeted to be filled April 1st, but then wasn't actually filled until the end of July. Then at the end of August in this year, one of our park maintenance staff resigned, which we decided to leave that position vacant until March 1st of 2022. So coming back to the salaries and wages being a major driver of the budget, you can see that with budgeting for approximately 2.5 more full-time staff in the 2022 budget year, as well as those impacts that I mentioned with the part-time staffing wages, of how this would be such a big change for our budget area. Overall, maintenance and repair budgets have increased slightly. In this area is because we're budgeting to hire a landscape contractor to maintain the landscaping at Centennial Park next year. This will cover around the fitness center as well as the activity center and the parking lot islands. These areas have continued to be a challenge for staff to manage, and this is our most highly visible and visited park, so it needs to improve. Utilities overall, again, are generally flat in 2022. And interestingly enough, our supply budgets are down. The major savings of these reductions is in our janitorial supplies area, despite the fact that we're still in a pandemic. This has been achieved over the past 1.5 years, 2 years now, through centralizing all of our cleaning supply purchases, keeping a close eye on that, switching to bulk disinfectant products that costs us less than 20 cents for a 32-ounce bottle to make versus the $6 to $8 we might spend if we were purchasing something like that, like a Clorox bottle off the shelf at Ace Hardware. So while we're using more product, it's costing us less. So at this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about the park services area.
Hi, Terry, it's Cindy again.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm excited to hear about Centennial. Would that go out to bid or would that go to the existing lawn contract, or is that going out to bid? How would that be handled?
Sure. So that would not have to go to bid as it stands on its own. If we decided to try to combine it with other contracts, it could and possibly go out to bid. Our lawn mowing contract, I would probably keep separate, so I wouldn't necessarily combine the two of those because they're kind of two different functions for us. So we haven't identified exactly how we're going to manage that as far as whether it would be combined with other services and be a potential bid, or if we would just be soliciting proposals and quotes from contractors. But
okay.
And if there are no other questions at this time, I will turn it over to the Marketing and Public Relations Director, Margaret Haller.
Thank you, Terry. I'd like to highlight some of the major activities for the marketing department in 2022. First, we will be assisting with the application for the Distinguished Agency Accreditation. Executive Director Mountcastle will be leading the process, with marketing assisting and many other staff members contributing to the application and evaluation. Distinguished Accreditation is a voluntary, comprehensive evaluation process to demonstrate that an agency has met state guidelines to provide exceptional park and recreation services to their community. It is administered by IAPD and IPRA jointly and sets benchmarks and best practices for operations, policies, procedures in all areas of the park district, including safety, facility management, recreation programming, and administration. For example, to tie this back to a discussion in a previous meeting, one of the standards is in regards to the mission statement and how often it should be reviewed by staff and the board. So this is an area we will review when we are working through the accreditation process. While this does not have an impact on the budget for 2022, this will be a major area of focus over the next year to 18 months. Moving on, the following two items are those with a substantial change to the budget. First, we have budgeted to increase the hours of the part-time digital marketing assistant from 10 hours to 20 hours per week. This results in a budget increase of $9,300 over the 2021 budget. The increase in hours will bring the position back to the level it was prior to the pandemic shutdown in 2020. Next, we have budgeted to print and mail a quarterly newsletter. As you are aware, the quarterly program brochure went to a digital format after the summer 2020 publication, and it is projected to stay digital in 2022 as a continued means to save expenses. However, it is felt that it's very important to have a vehicle to reach every household, and mail really is the ideal way to do that. This quarterly newsletter is budgeted to be 12 pages, similar to the spokesman that the city puts out, and mailed to every residential home in the Park District. It will contain reminders about registration, highlights of new programs, special events, programs, and other key information. For example, in autumn, it will have the annual financial information that is traditionally included in the brochure. The timing of the newsletter will coincide to support brochure program registration, and it's budgeted at $11,200 for postage and $12,800 for printing, for a total of $24,000. To provide a comparison, when we were printing the brochure in 2020, the budget was $21,000 in postage and $50,000 in printing, so just over $70,000. And to print and mail the brochure, again, it would be more than that as postage has gone up the last couple years, as well as paper and printing costs. While these are the major highlights for marketing, I also do need to point out that I work with the recreation managers to budget for marketing activities in their respective areas, and Superintendent Armour will highlight anything of significance when she provides the area information for the rec department. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer questions that the board may have.
This is Melissa. I don't have a question. I have a comment. I think it's a great idea to do a newsletter. You know, there is a part of me that does miss the brochure and looking through it. And I think that cue to residents that the season is starting and that just to drive them to the brochure and new programs is a good idea. And I think it's worth the expense. So just a comment.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bowe. I agree also. I think it really appeals to many different demographics, young or old, to be able to clearly see messaging from the Park District. So I support, you know, what many may seem as an old-fashioned way of communication. It certainly is as clear as you can get when you get something in the mail that's speaking to the main points that we want to get across.
Thank you.
This is Joan. Hi. Yeah, great idea on the newsletter. Have you ever been the Distinguished Agency Accreditation? Have you ever had that before?
At a previous district, I worked to get the district the Distinguished Agency Accreditation, and I know Executive Director Mountcastle has done it as well with the previous.
Yes,
agency.
I've done it at thanks, Margaret. I've done it at Des Plaines as well, Joan.
Okay, good. That's great. I think you should go for that. So neighboring Des Plaines, anyone else? Elk Grove?
Yeah, I was at Elk Grove when we did it.
And any other neighboring park districts have it?
I haven't looked up who actually has it, but they usually present them at conference, and I would say there's probably 10 a year that get the Distinguished.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right, Margaret. It is a pretty intense project.
Yeah,
it's, you know, making sure but it's also very positive for the district because it's making sure that we are, you know, in all areas of operations, as Margaret described it so well, that we are up to standard, and it helps us where we're not. So it's
well, absolutely. Now this is an award, correct?
It's more of an accreditation, so it's not an award. It's an accreditation. It's a voluntary thing to do.
And how long does the accreditation last?
That's what I was just going to say. It lasts 3 years. So in 3 years, you would need to be reaccredited. And actually, that's where it really shows how well an agency is doing, because some of those standards that are set forth are, you know, you need to do this annually. So when you go for reaccreditation, you need to prove that over the last 3 years you did do those items annually. So it really sets all those benchmarks for a district, and then that reaccreditation makes sure that you're keeping up with it.
Good. Go for it. Great. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to hand things over to Superintendent Armour.
Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to start out by giving you a bit of information about the work behind the scenes and how we get to the operational budget summaries you will see in the upcoming slides in the recreation operations overview. The direction for budgeting included to increase fees up to 1.4% based on prior year CPI, if the market can bear it, and also if it was necessary to increase more due to the minimum wage increase or any additional expenses. Some areas did see bigger impacts than others. Part of the team's research yearly involves looking at other park districts' pricing, fee structures, salaries, and then compare them with ours. We also review participation and then make a recommendation for potential fee increases. If the board is interested in seeing specifically any of these comparisons, we are happy to send for your review. We were again challenged this year with analyzing fee increases in conjunction with the minimum wage increase. We researched and evaluated comparison wages in each specific area to assist with new starting wages, as well as evaluating the compression scenarios, which allowed for increases above the starting wages for employees with longevity and additional education. The Park District also runs through the ebbs and flows of participation increases and decreases, and this year was, again, certainly another one with many highs and lows. But staff across the board continue to do an amazing job pivoting and responding to the many challenges and changes experienced this year and coming up with new ways to offer programs and services. While 2020 and 2021 were both obviously challenging years, the total numbers tallied in 2020 showed the district was still able to serve over 15,000 registered participants and over 160,000 daily users. This does not include events and offerings that don't require registration or a scan, or of course the people that visit our parks daily. That's pretty amazing. We certainly have a very dedicated team of individuals out there serving our public, and we can't wait to see where the 2021 participation ends up, as we know it can only go up from last year. There were 4 vacant positions in the recreation department at the start of this year. The 2022 budget proposes all full-time positions restored for the entire year. So to President Grau's statement about this being a hard budget to put together, it certainly was the case, balancing all of the things just already mentioned, keeping the fees in line, and trying to predict what participation will look like after 2 extremely challenging years was difficult. As we begin to run through the slides, in the recreation department, there will most often be one slide with budget numbers at the top and a chart showing the past year's actual net income, and then an additional slide or 2 with highlights from each specific area. And then we'll take a break and for questions after each area as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the recreation programs area. So this area is the only one which does not reflect facility operations expenses. It's primarily a recreation program area. The program areas include athletics, dance, camp, early childhood, preschool, teens, youth, parties, music, beyond the bell, and special events. As you can see, this picture tells a great story of the way the programs continue to expand and grow with the needs of the community in the past years, even during a pandemic. This year, we were happy to get a bit back to normal and offer some Friday night concerts, children's concert at Prospect Park, and some pop-up concerts as well. Looking at the 2021 budget, compared to the year-end estimates, we're unfortunately not able to get back to programming without mitigations, including social distancing, limited capacities, and cleaning time between some programs. So our year-end estimates are lower. However, the staff did continue to create new programs or adjust to keep the staff and patrons safe throughout the year, despite the mitigations challenges. The 2022 budget, we anticipate increasing participation, and this program area brings the budget back a bit closer to where we have seen participation in pre-pandemic times. Our focus will be to bring back as many programs that have not been offered in the past, while continuing to offer the new programs that were successful during the pandemic. On the next slide, I'll talk about some of the detailed budget changes. So there were a few programs that increased, as listed in the first bullet, but many program fees were increased significantly in 2020 or 2021 due to reduced maximums. So we either retain the rate or increase only at the 1.4% minimum. We do regularly add new programs to the portfolio, we highlighted a few examples here, including a teen life skills class, internet safety, home alone safety, pickleball at Woodland Park, and a new winter event. That's just to name a few. Our creative team continues to add as each brochure comes out. We do have some events returned to the budget, and very excited to reintroduce these back to the community. A preschool graduation ceremony, the 3rd of July fireworks, all the Friday night concerts, the movies in the park, all of the Prospect Park family concerts, and the early childhood expo. The dance recital will be held at the Performing Arts area at Prospect Park next year. The reason for this is the rental facility for the performance is extremely expensive, and we need to build up the dance program again. This year we had individual performances in the dance studio. Preschool graduation was held at the Performing Arts area this year and worked out really well. There were several events that were very well received during the pandemic and will remain as part of the offerings next year, including a few that you see listed here. You've been Grinch, the drive-through trunk or treat, Candyland Trail, and the scavenger hunt. Preschool and early childhood wages, the starting wages were evaluated and increased across the board. The beyond the bell rates listed are already in effect as reported at a previous board meeting, and camp will go into effect next year as you see listed here. The preschool and early childhood wages have been adjusted due to compression. Most wages were already above the minimum wage, so they were increased based on years of experience and education. So these are the highlights from the recreation programs area. So Julie and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have about these program areas.
Hey, April, it's Cindy again. Is the performing arts area at Prospect the outside?
Yes.
Okay. So you have to have weather contingency?
Yes. So the weather contingency would be a backup date or moving inside to O'Connor.
Okay.
Hi, this is Joan. Are you still going to have the ice skating show?
Yes, we are. That will be part of the Oakton area of the presentation. So that's in the that's at the ice rink. But yes, gotcha. That is
great.
The plan. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to outdoor pools. So when you look at the net income, outdoor pools have historically done well financially since the Aquatic Center at Centennial reopened in 2014 and Prospect opened in 2016. 2020 was obviously an extremely difficult year with only 2 pools open. However, outdoor pools did very well this year considering the challenges. Our year-end estimate is much higher than the 2021 budget as a result of many factors, including controlled expenses, multiple full-time staff vacancies for part or all of the year, as well as the reservation system in place at the start of the summer. There was a very quick transition to passes when we were able to move away from the reservation system at the beginning of the summer, which I know staff and patrons were both very grateful for. And we're pleased to have been able to keep all pools open the entire summer, given the difficulties with staffing shortages. So we have a few slides in the aquatic area that we'll move on to and give some detailed information. The proposed budget includes a 6% increase to pool pass fees. As a reminder, we did not increase the pool pass fees this year. So for example, our individual preseason rate would increase $5 from $86 to $91 with this 6% increase. We're also proposing a $1 increase to the daily admission fees at Centennial, as well as reduced fees in the evenings and senior rates at Hinckley and Centennial. So with this $1 increase, the daily admission fees would go from $8 to $9 for residents and $13 to $14 for non-residents. And this still allows us to remain competitive with our surrounding districts. We do plan to install lane lines at Hinckley to take some of the pressure off of Centennial. This will allow us to utilize for swim team, which we've had wait lists for that we're unable to accommodate, as well as to move evening lap swim to Hinckley from Centennial, which would slightly adjust open swim hours as well. Here also, which we've discussed in previous board meetings, we're increasing the starting wages above minimum wage for lifeguards, assistant managers, as well as managers. Moving on to the aquatic programs. The proposed budget for swim programs includes increases across the board. The specialty classes, after staff did some research, were significantly lower than surrounding area similar programs. And even with these proposed increases, this keeps us well within comparable rates, as well as allowing for competitive wage increases. Some of the dollars compared to percent impact is a $2 increase to swim lessons, up to a $12 increase for the advanced diving. We additionally increased the swim instructor starting wage above minimum wage and plan to add a junior lifeguard program to the aquatics program next year, which will hopefully assist with bringing these junior lifeguard participants into future lifeguard positions. Moving on to aquatic rentals, one more slide here. We're proposing increasing rental fees at all aquatic facilities, again, still remaining competitive in the area. The dollar amount for these increases range from $10 to $25 per rental. And based on patron requests over time, also adding the ability to add on individual pools, as well as offering evening rentals every day versus just on weekends was added. This would require closing Centennial 1 hour earlier during the weekdays, but the attendance tracked during these evening hours over the past several years, including pre-pandemic, supports closing early. We'll also plan to reinstate party options during open swim next summer. At this time, Ethan and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
This is Commissioner Tunnell. Thank you so much. Quick question on the junior lifeguard program. I think that's a brilliant idea to get young people interested at an early age. What age range do you anticipate that at?
Ethan, I'll let you answer that one.
Sure. Yeah, I think it really depends. Obviously, after speaking with Diane for, the possibility of, hiring at 15, like we could have a junior lifeguard program really anywhere from the age of probably like 10, 11 up to 14, 15. And then if they want to, at 15, if they want to apply and be hired, we can definitely run them through additional parts of the course to get them certified as a lifeguard. So like the junior lifeguard program doesn't certify these kids as lifeguards, but it definitely gives them a background in, what it takes to be a lifeguard. So I think it'll give, some of those kids perspective that it's not just, sitting in a chair, getting a tan. for 8 hours a day in the summer.
Thank you. I think that's a really good program where the youth and the community can get some practical on the job training too. So that really is exciting to me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Melissa, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So the pool pass, it would be an increase of 6%. So you talked about the increase for a single person, but for a, like say a family of 4, it's probably going to be about $15 increase for 6%. I mean, it could be significant for some people. I just wanted to hear more about the logic behind the 6% increase. Is it about staffing? Is it about comparability with other districts? Just want to hear more about the logic.
Well, it's a combination of all. It was a significant impact to the budget with these minimum wage increases, and the expenses continue to go up. And we are still comparable with our surrounding districts. We haven't raised our rates since 2020, so just keeping up with the expenses of the facilities is, we usually raise fees every year. But even by doing this, we are well within other districts and most often lower.
Okay. Because I view like a pool pass, I don't view it as like, I feel like it's almost equivalent to like general fund sort of free parks. I feel like a pool pass should be something that's accessible to all, and hence the question on that. And then the swimming lessons, do you know where that would fall out to on a per lesson basis for a typical session with that increase? I'm just mindful of all the swim schools in the area and wanting to make sure that we're a more affordable option with just as good of instruction. So I was just curious about what like the per class fee would be with that increase.
Yes, Ethan, you have that info, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up right now. Let me see it. I'll compare it. Our aquatic supervisor, Jenna, pulled those numbers. And if we're looking at the swim schools themselves, so like Goldfish, for instance, for a 30-minute group swim lesson at Goldfish, it's $25, whereas for our 30-minute class, we're at $16 per, for like hourly rate. So I think for us, we're also 35 minutes instead of 30. So I think when you're looking at us compared to the swim schools, I think we're very competitive rate wise with them. And we've even seen some people that have left our program, gone to like a Goldfish or a Foss or a Big Blue, and they've come back because it just, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out well for them. So they've come back and come back into our program. So I think like price wise, we're still competitive with those, those private swim schools that seem to always dig into our registration numbers.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about swim lessons. Obviously, they're very important for child safety, and given that our pools are taxpayer supported, I feel like we should just not be competitive. We should be better. We should offer better instruction and make sure we're affordable to everybody, because learning how to swim is a life skill. And I know we're a more well-off community, but not everybody necessarily has a lot of money to burn on swim lessons. So thanks for the explanations. And then I have one more question. Beyond the bell fee, I was interested in what for a Monday through Friday before and after care, like for a typical parent who's working full time, like what the fee increase would be for that. And if you don't have it on hand, you can send it to me later. I'm glad that we're going to be paying the counselors more, and I just wanted to know what the corresponding increase would be in light of the fact that it's a child care expense in the community.
Julie, do you have that handy, or do we want to loop
You can
back
send
with
it
Melissa on
later.
that?
I do have it handy. Before care from 7 to 9 is $7 for the day. So $7 for the 2 hours. Aftercare is $10 from 3:30 to 6. I get confused because my school ends at 3. And then if they're doing before and aftercare, it's $15.04. And then the Wednesday, the Wacky Wednesday early dismissal is $13 for that aftercare.
Yeah, I was just looking at like for the whole school year. I mean, I can try to do the math, like what the typical increase would be per kid for someone who's doing Monday through Friday before and after. But I could probably cobble it together with those, like before and after. I can follow up via email.
Yeah, you know what? I do have it because we're doing the winter brochure right now, so it's in there. So I can just get that for you.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have at this point. Thanks.
Thank you.
I wanted to follow up. I agree with Melissa on both the lessons and the pool pass. And I'm just going to throw a random thought out there for future. You know, some institutions like the zoos or the museums or whatever have free days. And maybe that's something that we could do on a, you know, I don't know when is a good day to do that. I know they do theirs in the winter. But you know, I do worry about accessibility on our pools. And the swim lessons, I was trying to page through our report. Are we back to full, how are we doing on our swim lessons? Is this going to impact negatively on our numbers on swim lessons? I guess that was the question.
Our swim lessons are building back up. We're definitely at a much better place than we were previously last year. But we're still struggling with staff and space in the pool. There's still some parents who aren't comfortable with the participation numbers that we've had in the past. So we are getting back up to previous participation levels, but we're definitely not there yet and need to find additional staff to get there. And Ethan, jump in at any time if you want to add anything. We did discuss in one of our marketing meetings at some point bringing back, we previously had the try swim lessons for free. It's like an intro and to get people interested in the class, but we, you know, right now we don't have the space or the staff to do so. So we're holding off on that. It was one of our previous marketing and getting people to try our program. But we're still, again, very reasonable in the area, as well as obviously, as Ethan mentioned, compared to these private swim clubs.
Right. Well, I do agree with what Melissa said, that it is a life skill and we're the park district, so it has to stay affordable. And so I don't know, you know, if we can't fill the classes now, or if we can't hold more classes, we're going to increase the rates though. And I understand there's pressure because of the wages.
Yeah, we're anticipating, you know, hopefully being able to allow more participation next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ultimately the goal. And we, like April was saying, like we still have some parents that are wary of having, you know, previously we would, you know, pack the pool with like 40 kids in that lap pool for learn to swim, and you know, people, it would be like 6 kids for one instructor and really just have the pool extremely full. And parents are very hesitant to have that many of their kids because they are, when they're in the pool, unmasked. And that's, I think, giving some parents some hesitation on you know, having larger learn to swim sessions. We have seen people, the interest is still there and it's starting to increase more, but we're trying to when we're working with high school students, their schedules change constantly with sports and school. So it's still trying to schedule lessons and schedule enough staff to make sure that we are able to cover all areas and all the kids that want to sign up.
Thank you.
Hey, I also wanted to kind of echo the thoughts of Commissioner Grau and Commissioner Halting. Like the cost of going to the pool is something I've actually heard residents with, multiple children already complaining about. And I do think because we are, like we're not like a private company like Big Blue or Goldfish, right? Like we are partially taxpayer funded, and I also agree with the importance of it being a life skill, and just the importance of like if we're asking for people to continue to pay for these amenities and pay for upgrades to these amenities, and oh, by the way, also pay for like other potential large amenities, like at some point I don't think we get a cookie for saying we haven't increased it since 2020. It's only 2021. So, I mean, I would think that especially with everything, else that our residents have gone through, I don't feel good or in favor of raising the cost of the aquatic center passes or daily passes or swim lessons for that matter. So those are my thoughts on that.
Just wanted to chime in. This is Gail, and I can appreciate that. I've been at a few other districts and this district when we've held off on increasing on a regular basis these fees for pools, and all it does is pile up, and we will start going into a negative, which is okay if that's what the board wants philosophy to be, because as these pools age, they will start having major issues in terms of, just aging. It's just the cost of doing business with pools. And they typically a lot of pools lose, operations lose money. And so our philosophy has been to raise them incrementally every couple of years around to keep up with that. But instead of having to increase them, and I think we had to do that right after I got here by a very large amount to get them to a place where we could, even be breaking even and making a little money. So it's just a philosophy, and certainly we can, if the whole board's not comfortable with that philosophy, we can change that. And that could be a discussion, for when we go to approve the budget. We can also, it sounds like maybe it would be helpful to send the board the detail on the comparative rates for specifically this area. And we might be doing that for all the areas, just so you have that, because I know you get a lot of pressure, on this in the public.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it's not about pressure from the public. It's about like what I feel is the right thing to do the public. For the public. And I just want to make, like, nobody's pressuring me. This is like, and yeah, I've heard people say this and it's made me think, right? And like my family is a 4-person family. And so, but it's a lot different. Like we're actually, for Park Ridge, I feel like only having 2 kids is almost being a small family. So when I look at the families that have like maybe 3 or like it at a certain point kind of becomes ridiculous that for this publicly funded amenity to have that range. And I realize, there are pools that are worse, right? That are like worse in terms of cost to the consumer visiting them. But well, I guess one of my other follow-up questions then would be, if we held the rates of lessons and pass costs consistent for 1 more year, acknowledging that the last couple of years have been really rough for not just us, but also a lot of people in the community, like, would that cause us to operate at a deficit pool wise?
April, did you, I don't know if you guys looked at that, because our,
And I mean, maybe you haven't had a chance to do that.
Well, our direction to staff is always the one, the CPI or marketplace, right? And so they look at both of those items plus our increased expenses. And it's the wages that will catch up. It may not hurt us this year. It's kind of the whole thing like with the taxes, right? It's like, yes, we could put it off, but it just becomes, an escalation. Again, if that's the direction for the board, we can give you an amount. I'm sure we could figure that out, what that would look like for 1 year. And that's certainly something we can do. I don't know if April, if you have anything to add to that, or Sandra.
No,
and then you got to go ahead.
We did not look at a 0% increase. That was not something we considered, primarily based on the increasing expenses as well as the minimum wage. That was a very large dollar amount. Ethan, do you have that handy, just the increase of staff, what that amount was?
I'm muted, sorry. But let me grab it here. Hold on.
Yeah, so we're going to be in the same boat next year with the minimum wage increase. So that was.
I mean, I understand that the rates can't stay static forever, but I mean, after 2020 was severely reduced access, right? Which is totally, obviously, we all understand. And last year it was like the weird hybrid switch over, like midsummer, which once again, like obviously not the park district's fault. But what I'm saying is like because it's not just the park district that had a rough couple of years, it was the community too. And I just think, considering that a lot of this is taxpayer funded, giving the community a year of not having an increase would, I think, be both in terms of the importance of having swimming as a life skill and the importance of community goodwill on this popular amenity is just, to me, it seems like a sensible and fair thing to do for the community.
Yeah, that was our philosophy this year, to not increase anything.
Right, but I mean, this year was still kind of like, especially with the Delta, like this year still was not a normal year, right? This is just just my thoughts, and there may be other commissioners who feel completely different, but I would feel remiss if I didn't present my case for this.
Yeah, and that's certainly like I said, totally understandable. We did hold the fees this year, and then you've got to think of the taxes though too. I'm not saying none of it goes to the pool, but the taxes is more for the general fund and general operations overall, and it's not to support. Now the capital, yes, right? So it goes to support capital, but a lot of these facilities, they're structured to support themselves by the operations.
Right, but at the end of the day, it was a taxpayer referendum that was responsible for things like, like the Centennial Aquatic Center upgrade. And I absolutely, I wasn't on the board back then, but I was a resident, and I absolutely think that was a fantastic thing to do. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, I don't think you can really divorce the two, especially in the eyes of the taxpayer who just gets the overall statement. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
This is Sandra. I'll just jump in. I think Gail made a really good point about incremental increases versus not having increases for numerous years in a row, and how that impacts later on. But I think what we can certainly do is ask April and Ethan to calculate what the difference in revenue would be versus holding those fees without increasing them. And, we can give you that total, and, that would impact it really impacts what's available then to transfer to capital, absent any other changes to the budget.
Okay.
Yes, we would calculate that for the fitness center as well, because the indoor aquatics programs are at the fitness center.
Yeah, this is Cindy. I think, and maybe it doesn't have to be a 0. I just think 6% just really jumps out. 6 and 7% and 10% really jumps out. So it's worth a look at.
I agree, not to belabor it, but I know these facilities are meant to be self-supporting, but I think the pool is a special animal and it's different from Oakton and it's different from the fitness center. This is something that's used broadly across the community. So it's just it feels different to me. It feels like a core thing that everyone should be able to afford. So I will keep my mouth shut so you can move on. Thank you for your patience with all the questions and discussion.
Hi, this is Joan. Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on the increases. I am always a big proponent of market rate, and what is Des Plaines doing? Where is Niles at? That's really what I want to know. And 6% does seem high, but I do think we have to go up next year. I think your higher increases in rentals is much better idea than the daily ones. So if you're making money, going back to the 30-minute group thing, if you're making money at $16 and then the competition is charging $25, wow, that's great, and maybe you can even go higher on that. But I did like Melissa's philosophy of as life skill is important, but I think we do have to maintain and we do have to increase. I'm not sure 6% is the right number for the daily and the passes, but I'd really like to see what Des Plaines, Niles, and I guess Glenview is offering. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We can send the entire board the comparison information for aquatics specifically.
That's great. This has been a great conversation, especially sort of on the general philosophy of fees versus taxes. This is Commissioner Coyne, by the way, just to chime in since nobody can see me. The question I have is concerning, well, the only comment I have, I guess, is concerning the idea of life skill sort of part where swimming comes in as a life skill. And, I have raised 2 swimmers and one was a lifeguard, so I kind of understand the whole concept of what you're getting at. However, are you proposing that people are concerned about the cost of swim lessons? That might be one thing. If we're talking about the general increases that I'm seeing on the board right now about wading pool and splash pad and the aquatic center rental fees, those are sort of a supply and demand thing in my mind, because that's all recreational stuff. It's not learning a life skill other than you're not, people aren't paying that stuff to come and swim laps and learn how to be better swimmers. They're taking lessons for that. So I get that learn to swim classes, maybe we should consider towing a line on to make them more accessible. But the recreational use of the pool should be sort of a much more market focused, and as Commissioner Bendy mentioned, the reason I bring that up is because the other thing is that we have a limited amount of space, we have a limited amount of water, and based on last year, even with restrictions, people were clamoring to go to the pool, and they're going to continue to clamor to go to the pool even if there's a price increase, because it's still, I'm assuming, and you can you can get those numbers to us, I'm assuming that we're still a pretty good deal in terms of being able to use our water facilities recreationally. We certainly are in terms of the lessons, but I get that you might want to make those lessons more accessible, at least the early lessons of what my daughter, who's a swimmer, said, the learn not to drown classes. We should encourage as many people as we can to do those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the aquatics, outdoor aquatics? Okay, sounds like we're ready to move on to the Oakton Ice Arena. So the Ice Arena anticipates ending the year pretty close to budget, even with some unexpected facility repairs throughout the year. Early in 2021, operations remained under strict mitigations and reduced capacity for programming. Throughout the year, things slowly are building back up, but there were still programming reductions as a result of lower demand. By this autumn, staff was rebuilding the introductory levels in tots and pre-hockey, but still have major holes in the more advanced levels due to 12 months off from these programming levels. We anticipate to see similar levels of growth in 2022 as the programs are rebuilt, and as I already mentioned, this does anticipate bringing the ice show back as well. So our Learn to Skate and Learn to Play hockey classes, we proposed an increase of 4%, as well as 5 to 6% increases to ice rental rates. The increase to the classes have the average class at about $17.50 per hour, which is very similar to Glenview. And the classes have a less than $1 average increase. The rental increase is a $15 hourly increase and still keeps the prime rate below the rinks in the area. Again, as an example, Glenview's prime time hourly rental rate is $435 and ours would be $365 in 2022. The freestyle sessions also increased by just $1 per session. The staff continues to foster relationships with both the Chicago Blackhawks and the Chicago Wolves to co-brand the Learn to Play hockey and leverage the marketing reach. And we'll continue the House League program with our hockey affiliate as well. Staff plans to add back a part-time hockey supervisor position to monitor the Learn to Play hockey classes. This will increase communication with staff and participants with a consistent staff member to assist in growing the program. This has been something that's been difficult for full-time staff to take time to focus on. Lastly, we do also have several positions here that were analyzed and increased above the minimum wage, including the cashier, building supervisor, and clerical positions. Are there any questions for Brent or I on the Oakton Ice Arena facilities or programs? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the Centennial Fitness Center. So in addition to the pandemic, we continue to have the challenge of the multiple fitness centers and private studios in the area. And FFC down the street opened in 2017, which you can see clearly on the actual net income chart. We had strong marketing plans in place at that time and been out promoting very strongly in 2019, and that's also when the non-resident fee removal was implemented in August of 2019, which we saw almost immediate positive results and a very strong first quarter in 2022, which was very promising. And of course, we all know what happened, and it's caused challenges with new members and retention. The year-end estimates, however, shows better than what was budgeted this year. This was, again, a combination of an increase in participation as well as controlling expenses. And this was one of the areas that at the beginning of the year, we were down several full-time staff members at the fitness center. However, the mask mandate back again beginning in August has unfortunately resulted in another slowdown in membership and group fitness participation. But we do continue to still see new members. In 2022, we do anticipate a continued increase in participation, but this budget does not yet reflect pre-pandemic participation. It does also reflect all full-time staff positions returning, including the last vacant full-time position at this facility, which Terry mentioned, the facility maintenance 2 to be filled. And again, as we just mentioned, the indoor swim lessons are also part of this facility's budget. Despite all of the challenges, we continue to serve the community, even despite the pandemic. I know you all know how creative the team has been there throughout this entire process to move things indoors, outdoors, change, and move everything around constantly. So between drop-ins, classes, and membership, approximately 90,000 visits came through the facility in 2020. So that's still pretty impressive. And again, we'll see what this year brings as our totals. So we have a few slides here to cover some of the changes we are anticipating. Well, this first one is not a change. We'll continue to focus on retention and attracting new members, of course. And we have a strong marketing initiative in place with targeted goals to keep building participation back. We're proposing a $1 increase for membership per month. So this is a 2.5 to 5.6% increase depending on the membership. And we're also proposing an increase of 5% in group fitness. So the largest increase would be for the 10-pack, that would be a $5 increase. We're also proposing an increase in short-term memberships ranging from 4 to 10%. So depending on the membership, this would be an approximate increase of $5 to $10 per membership. The goal here is to drive membership to the annual option. As you know, we've also had many problems with Open Gym and have recently initiated some changes. We're also proposing raising the drop-in fee just to one fee for all ages to encourage memberships among our youth and to have a better understanding of who's in the facility at all times. Many of the disciplinary issues occur with youth drop-ins that don't have a picture on file. Again, this rate continues to be a competitive rate. Many facilities don't even have a drop-in or keep it very high to discourage this amenity. All right, the next slide here. We also plan to increase starting wages at this facility at the front desk, and this will be based on experience, the $13 to $15 an hour. We also plan to increase operating on the weekend hours further. We've been slowly bringing back hours throughout this year as we are able. Saturday would increase an additional hour, and Sundays would increase an additional 3 hours from where they're currently at. This budget proposes partial towel service to be reinstated under a controlled environment through the front desk for members. However, the locker room attendant will remain vacant with this controlled towel service arrangement. And the current budget does not anticipate the child care services to return, unfortunately. There's been very minimal inquiries about this service returning, really just a handful in comparison to what we've heard about the towels and the hours. And as already mentioned, the last open position, the full-time maintenance position, will be restored. So at this time, Justin and I would be happy to answer questions from the board.
Hi again. It's Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
I'm really sad about the childcare. As you probably figured I would be.
Yes.
You're probably not hearing about it because you don't have that demographic at the fitness center. You know, I mean, with the changes you made I think it was 2 years ago, showed that it was viable. And you're just saying no for the whole year. You're budgeting no for the whole year.
We are, and with anything, we continue to evaluate as the year goes on. And if we do get requests or, you know, our budget is looking better than anticipated. This one was in 2019, it was a loss of over $20,000 to the facility. So
but you made changes partly through that year, right?
We did, yes. We changed it to a different system. But even doing that, it would not have, you know, it's a service to the facility. It would not have even come close to breaking even.
And how much is towels?
Towels, let's see, we added about 10,000 back into the budget for the towels. Is that correct, Justin?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if I was a parent, I'd rather have childcare than a towel, but that's just really disappointing. And I know you're in between a rock and a hard place. There's not money laying around to do nice to haves, but I just feel like you've lost that demographic, and that's why you're not hearing about it. So that's just my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also like to chime in regarding the child care. Like, I know that when I had a kid who was young enough that she wasn't in school yet, like, I was able to have a fitness center membership because of the child care services option. So I think and I'm sure there's other parents who are in a similar boat. And I mean, I understand now with restrictions and everything else that it's hard, but I definitely think that's something you should look into potentially restoring, because yeah, I mean, well, it might look on the surface, if you just look purely at the cost of the program itself and the staffing it versus what the passes for it bring in, then, and it operates as a loss, that's one thing. But if you also look at the bigger picture of, well, are there full memberships we're losing because we don't have this, you know, that's something to take into account as well. I mean, like, I know for friends who go to FFC, one of the big things they love about it is the childcare option. And I mean, there's other things that are, you know, are not great in terms of like their pricing compared to ours. But I mean, I know that for a lot of parents is a big plus, because it's, you know, like right now, obviously, like, well, not obviously, but I mean, there's a lot of parents who still like somebody staying at home, right? So it's kind of less of a necessity. But as people do start returning to the workplace, if you have somebody whose, you know, ability to really utilize a membership depends on whether or not they have a place to drop a safe place to drop their kid for an hour and a half, like, that's something that could actually have a negative impact on memberships that would sort of offset, you know, the loss. Just something to think about, because yeah, I mean, like I say this as somebody who's not that many years removed from having a kid who was home with me all the time when she was littler.
Yes, and it's certainly disappointing to us, and something we have discussed, and balancing that with what we're hearing from our current members, you know, and as we were tracking membership when people were canceling or putting them on hold, that is an option, and it was just so minimal, and we're not getting the calls and we're not getting inquiries about it. So it's certainly a balancing act, and it's not only about the revenue, but the revenue is certainly a factor when we're proposing to net $18,000, which wouldn't even cover opening the child care center in 2019 times. So we talked about that, extensively. It's not something we're happy about, and we certainly, if we can bring it back sooner rather than later, just because it's not, just like anything else, because it's not in the budget doesn't mean it couldn't happen, and that's not on our radar.
Right, and I would just want you to keep an open mind about it, and then maybe even the people to survey might be the people who would potentially use it, like the parents who have their kids in some of the parent and child early education classes. Like those might be the people who you'd want to survey and say, like, okay, if you're not a member, would you be more likely to be a member if you had this option? Just a thought.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Joan. I'd like to say something too about the child care. I think if you really are sincere about eventually bringing it back, I think you should figure out what time frames are the best. And, maybe you start small, maybe you do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours, after work or whatever it is, or not at all, I don't know. But whatever it is, and are they people who like to go upstairs, or do they like the classes? That's something that you need to find. But I think Cindy's right about the demographics. If you're losing them, you're gonna lose them for a long time if you're not catching them early when they have their young kids, and they might have a little bit of time, but they need that child care. I mean, that's the whole that's what the whole country's talking about, is child care. So maybe, I don't know. I think I would like to see some little research, or a little what you think, your own opinions as to what you think time frames might work, and what can you offer the people who need it. Is it some fantastic class that they might want to go to, or is it just going upstairs? Do they want to just work out for an hour or something like that? So anyway, I would like to see more about childcare, and not be saying, I don't want to repeat the same conversation in a year from now, because we haven't had it for a whole year. So if you can do that, I'd really, really like to know more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, sounding like there's none, we will move on to the driving range. So here you can see the driving range had another fantastic year. 3 private instructors were added, and golf classes were condensed into a consistent schedule, maximizing staff availability. Continued tea sales created additional revenue source as well. The tea sales were initially introduced and started as a pandemic safety precaution versus handing out and turning them back in. But the customers like this process with the new teas better, so it will continue. On the next slide, we'll talk about some of the changes to this area. We're proposing a 5% increase to group lessons, which is about $1 average increase per class. The reduced hours of operations in non-prime season has worked well to reduce staffing costs and will continue in 2022. There's been no negative feedback since this was implemented. We're planning a $1 increase to bucket sales, and we have a phased purchasing of replacement mats, and this budget reflects 20 new hitting mats next year. Several new specialty clinics will be added to the regular class schedule, and with the additional instructors added this year, we anticipate an increase in private instruction classes as well. And with the wage increase above minimum wage, we also anticipate the cashier at the driving range to have a higher wage as well. So any questions for Brent and I on the driving range?
This is Commissioner Tunnel. I just have a quick question. Have we ever considered renting out that facility in the past, or have we ever done that, or is that an option right now? Just curious.
We have had rentals in the past. I think just one or two from what I can recall. It's based on inquiry. It's just so hard with all of the open hours to coordinate, but yes, we've been open to that and have done that in the past.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the Centennial Activity Center. So the Activity Center is our home for senior and active adult programming, as well as our STAR membership. The center is subsidized in order to provide affordable recreation opportunities to seniors, as well as rentals for the entire community. In 2019, we began an independent contractor relationship with the Brookton Arts Center, which has been very successful and continues to grow, which is primarily why you see the net improve in the 2022 proposed budget so much, along with the anticipated increase in programming. The staff and center continue to see growth and participation with creative offerings, but there are still continued unavoidable operating expenses, some of which were not accounted for prior to 2014, where we see the additional dip as we started to reallocate the expenses to the proper area. So some highlights from our budget and the programming area. We continue to build back the membership and hope to use survey results from a survey this year to guide programming in 2022. And of course, always using feedback from the participants in person as well. An increase in membership fees was not recommended in 2022. When memberships were re-implemented in July of this year, there was a 4% increase already established. The special events and program fees will see an increase of 2.3%, and so will Brookton. As already mentioned, the Brookton programming has been very successful, and we hope to see that continue in 2022. The anticipated revenue in the budget is $150,000 with a net revenue of $60,000. So the plan is to implement quarterly promotions to entice participation to the STAR membership and for staff to get back out to the community and promote the facility and its membership. And to expand 18 and adult programming by adding 2 to 3 classes per season. Some programs might include sewing, knitting, crocheting, line dancing, swing dancing, and then a new, at least one new trip per season. So are there any questions for Jennifer or I about the Centennial Activity Center?
I actually had a question related to Brookton. You know, I've mentioned the topic of Scout badges before, and I know Wildwood has a good array for both, you know, like Cub Scouts and Daisies and Brownies and Girl Scouts. And I was wondering, since there are art-related badges, is that something that Brookton would look at maybe adding, like programming where, you know, Scouts pay $4 or $5 a head and get there, and then they go for an hour and get their Potter badge or outdoor painting or something like that?
I know that currently Alyssa does work with several different Girl Scout groups to coordinate badge programs within their little troops. And then we're also seeing a lot of rentals at the center for our program space because the schools have recently stopped allowing the groups to meet at Washington. At least that's what I know of at this point.
All of these were at least until December 31st, Scout groups aren't allowed, and now their outdoor groups aren't allowed to meet.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of those leaders come and rent at the facility, which has kind of sparked our thoughts as to how we can accommodate these groups better by offering different badges. I don't know, we've got like, I know that they do a cooking badge at Main Park, but we also have a kitchen. So there are some opportunities there that I'm definitely looking to explore.
Yeah, and it's good to know that that's a thing because, you know, like with Wildwood, you can click on the link and there's like a whole listing of like, we do these badges for days that like kind of coordinate with the days, these Daisy badges and these for brownies and these for junior, right? Like there's a whole thing that makes it much easier to find. And I think it's great to know that Brickton has kind of coordinated that too, but I think it would be nice if the information was just sort of more readily available.
Sure.
So, like, for instance, if I was going to bring my brownies by for a Potter badge, I'd know ahead of time, okay, it's going to be $5 a girl for an hour-long program, you know, like whatever it is. But it'd be nice to just like have that information more accessible.
Yes, for sure. We will definitely work on that. As you know, they're an independent contractor, so I will work with the director there to get more information in our next brochure.
Great, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've been looking at other districts, both at Boy Scout programming and Girl Scout programming. Like, I do think it's an opportunity to derive more revenue from a different kind of event, right?
Yes, for sure. We're definitely open to any opportunities like that, so.
Great.
And Commissioner Leduc, hopefully you saw that we put back into the brochure the badge opportunities at the ice rink as well as for swimming.
Ooh, I did not see that, and I will have to take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hey, it's me again. I'm sorry. I just want to ask a philosophical question about how we get to the point where we say what things we will underwrite at a loss and what we won't. Just, you know, backing up to our last conversation of childcare and saying we can't underwrite that, but we can underwrite the senior center. And is that, you know, is that done across all communities? And I don't know that that needs to be answered at this moment, but it, you know, it just kind of sticks out at me.
Yeah, that's part of our financial policies also, to take a look at our senior activities as well as our teen activities. And historically, since I've been here and the other park districts that I've worked at, the senior programs have always been subsidized. Generally, you know, these scholarships assist with those who are unable to pay for programs in other areas as well as in senior programs. We have had seniors that have used the scholarship program. But that has been our philosophy as far back as I can recall. And Gail or Sandra, you might want to jump in on that question as well.
Yeah, I would agree with what April said, that's been the philosophy here about the activity center, and it's also paying for the expenses of the building where the other program areas don't always do that. Now, there are certain revenue center facilities, and the fitness center that you brought up, Cindy, is one of those that is meant to, you know, support itself and hopefully make, you know, net profit. But, you know, that's all within the board's, you know, purview to look at those policies and make changes if you would like.
Yes, and if you look at the detail on the Centennial Activity Center, the program areas do not run at a loss. It's to cover the facility.
But we're not doing childcare because it's a loss. That's what I'm saying. We're not providing childcare because it would be a loss to that profit center.
So this is Sandra. I just pulled up the revenue policy, so I can just direct you to, and I can send this to you. But what the current policy states is that you know, it's pretty broad, but We say the district will consider the following cost recovery objectives when establishing fees and charges. Cost recovery for services and facilities which are in high demand should be relatively high. Cost recovery for which high levels of participation provide a service integral to the district's mission, and we use the examples such as senior and teen programs, should be relatively low when participation levels would otherwise be low. The amount of surcharges to cover, reflect direct and indirect costs will be determined annually during each budget cycle. So that's how we've set out the philosophy. And of course, we can, look at making any adjustments that you think would be appropriate.
Thank you.
This is Joan. I think Cindy makes a great point about subsidizing the activity center, which is I think a good thing for the community, and also the young moms. I think maybe that has to be thought of as maybe another subsidy. So I think that's something the board should really discuss soon in the new year, and make it, something we can talk about. Maybe we'll agree. Maybe we'll come to the conclusion that we want to subsidize it. Maybe we won't. But I think that's a conversation we really should have soon. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounding like there's no other questions or comments. Moving on to the batting cages. This is just one single slide. The batting cages did saw a slight increase in participation as an outdoor amenity in 2020 when there was, not many options, but leveled back off this year, as you can see in our year-end estimate. We did start a partnership with Youth Baseball, our affiliate, in 2013, and we're now getting a flat rate contribution versus a per person rate, which started in 2018. So the batting cage facility is one we continue to run and operate, and as long as we have the relationship with Youth Baseball and no unforeseen expenses, we can operate at close to break even. All right, moving on to the Wildwood Nature Center. As you can see, the Nature Center also took a hit in 2020, like many of the other areas, but luckily they have bounced back quickly and are anticipating positive net revenue this year. Unfortunately, due to social distancing, many camps had to lower their maximums. Camps like Discovery and SSO Nature Camps were not able to be offered. Therefore, we did not hit the anticipated budget. However, staff worked hard to be innovative during this pandemic to continue to serve the community and maintain revenue for operations. So they added Camp Jam Packed to accommodate the waitlist from Nature Camp, and also moved Halloween Hoopla outdoors and offered on 3 different nights, amongst other things they did to keep the Nature Center families active and outdoors. So we anticipate continued growth and reinstating the camps missing in the 2 past years in 2022. So some of the highlights on the next slide. There's many popular programs at the Nature Center that continue to be included in the 2022 budget, such as Nature Preschool, Play School, Lunch Bunch, Nature Camp, and Wild Child. And the 2 camps to reinstate would be Discovery Crew and SSO Nature Camp. And we're very excited to bring back Earth Day and the Country Farm Fair. So those are back into the budget. We did remove a few programs that have sizzled out or no longer needed. Camp Jam Pack was removed, which was a half-day camp with no indoor location and a substitute for Discovery Crew Camp. And we removed the virtual camps, animal encounters as well. The programs that saw fee increases above the recommended amount are also listed here. An increase to pavilion rentals, birthday parties, one-time nature classes, and nature programs, as well as group programs. We also here propose wage increase as listed. The camps increased to $13 an hour start, and the same as in what we already previously discussed. The preschool and early childhood wages were adjusted based on years of experience and education. Are there any questions about the Nature Center for Julie or myself?
I just wanted to jump in just as a compliment and say that it really, the way the new the outdoor area looks by Main Park and by Wildwood and the circle with like the area where you can post things, it's just definitely lovely to see these opportunities and to witness some of these classes, even these ones with like these adorable toddlers learning about nature concepts. So I just wanted to throw in a job well done to the Wildwood Nature crew.
Thank you. We'll be sure to pass that along. Well, that concludes our presentation for this evening. So I think we can open it up for any general questions across the board for the entire team. Anything that you missed or want to go back and review?
Hi, this is Sandra back again. And if you have, as April mentioned, if you have anything now, it would be a great time to discuss it. If you need some time to reflect and digest, please reach out to us with your questions or comments as soon as possible. And for the follow-up items that were identified this evening, or any additional questions or comments, we will respond and distribute the information to all of you in advance of the December 2nd meeting, so you'll be prepared to provide your direction. Well, thanks again for your attention and diligence in reviewing the proposed budget. So we could turn it back over to Commissioner Tunnell unless there's any other questions.
Thank you so much for all the work that went into that. I know a lot of people put a lot of time into that, so thank you very much. I move to adopt resolution number 21-1, a resolution determining the amounts of money exclusive of debt service and election costs estimated to be necessary to be raised by taxation pursuant to the proposed levy of the Park Ridge Park District for the levy year 2021. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, may we have a call for a vote?
Commissioner Bendy?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
No.
Commissioner Holting?
Yes.
Commissioner LeDuc?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
No.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to yield the floor to Commissioner Bindi, our liaison of recreation.
All right, hi, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Tunnell. Okay, over to Superintendent Armour for your report on recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. My report begins on page 29. As you can see, October brought many festive events to the community, including the drive-through trunk or treat, hay rides, parades, bingo, Halloween hoopla, skeleton egg hunt, pumpkin smash and bash, and a Halloween house decorating contest. Very festive. The teens also enjoyed a trip to Fright Fest, and the seniors had a Halloween-themed luncheon and show. As you can see on page 30, progress continues on the wait list at Beyond the Bell, and based on feedback from the board last month, staff was able to update the chart to show the individuals on the wait list versus total wait list numbers with duplicated participation. So hopefully that helps to answer the questions that you had last time. I did also want to point out the youth basketball participation numbers currently. They've really skyrocketed this year, pretty awesome. And looking at the Nature Center on page 32, it was also great to see the birthday party participation back to where it was in 2019. So also starting on page 32, there's a summary of the 2021 camp season. It includes participation, camp financials, and survey information. While it was, of course, again, a challenging summer for all and still many modifications required, it was great to have all the campers out and about at all of the facilities this summer. At Oakton, you can see the program participation continues to grow and the ice rentals remain stable compared to previous years. And on pages 34 and 35, you'll also see season summaries from the driving range and batting cages. As just mentioned in the presentation, it was another phenomenal season, and we're pleased to see the growth in classes and private instruction with the new instructors on board. The Centennial Activity Center continues to see membership growth as they rebuild the program. There were 27 new members in October, which was actually the same as in 2019. And in addition to many other events and programs, an open house and community resource fair was also held in October. The fitness center did see a small increase in membership the month of October and lower cancellations, which was positive. And there was also a new membership promotion, as well as the launch of a new business Facebook page for the fitness center. The indoor swim lessons continue to grow, as we just discussed, of course, significantly from last year and close to 100 more participants than last month in September. And then at the very end, there's some upcoming programs for your review. And that's a brief summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the managers are all still here, so they could answer as well if you have anything specific.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out. My son attended his first middle school night at the pool recently, and so did some of his friends, and they all had a blast. And I was glad to see, because I heard from some other parents that they actually hadn't heard about it until the last minute. So I was glad that you passed out the flyers telling you about the upcoming date for the participants. So hopefully they'll spread the word and even more kids will come on down for that. And I mean, as a parent, I feel like that's having the middle school night at the pool where they have this like dedicated pool activity is like less of a recipe for miscreants than having them running around a gym, right? So I thought that this was a really well done program, and my 11-year-old approves.
Great, thank you.
April, I had a question. It looks like the preschool numbers disappeared this month.
Were there any changes since the previous? Yeah, if there's no changes, we don't always repeat the chart.
I think I had a question last month about the preschool numbers you were going to check into, if I remember.
I believe we sent it in a follow-up document.
Oh, I'll have to find it. Okay.
Yeah. It was in with the, you had questions about, well, multiple commissioners had questions about the Beyond the Bell and the preschool. So that was in the same summary document.
Okay.
I had a question about, there's a comment in here about people are saying at the fitness center that they don't want to work out indoors with masks and are pursuing classes at other nearby locations where the mask mandates are not enforced. Are you at liberty to say where the less enforced places might be that people say they're
I think everywhere else.
To? everywhere else. So we're a lone wolf in making people wear masks-ish.
That's what we're hearing, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for April? No, none? Okay. Thank you, April. Let's go on to buildings and grounds with Melissa. You want to take over for that?
Yes, I would. I'm getting back to my agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry.
Thank you. My project I'm thinking about the project. My board report begins on page 42. I do want to highlight something with Woodland Park and just let the board know that we've reached a tentative agreement on that change order that's been brought up and discussed. And that'll be something that we'll be bringing to the board at the next meeting for approval. And if there's anything else that in my board report you'd like to ask any questions about, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Terry?
Love the list of trees.
I did too. The 3 apple trees at Prospect. How long till we get some apples?
A good couple of years. I was asking that too. I didn't get a definitive answer from Glenn, but when we purchased that property, it had a couple of trees that were bearing fruit and bearing apples when we were walking around the property. And I remember walking around looking at the property, eating apples off the tree when we were first looking at it. So, I think Glenn had heard about that and staff had talked about that, and I thought it'd be fun to bring a few apple trees back there.
So those trees were removed, the older ones.
Yeah, they were, and they were actually in pretty poor shape and decline, but they were exactly where the parking lot, the large portion of the parking lot is there now.
Okay.
I love the variety of trees that you've got there. How do you go about choosing from such a variety for those locations? Is it just to try to diversify?
Yeah, a number of years ago when we did our first tree inventory, and I really started to further my education on trees. And at the time we were staring at the face of the emerald ash borer and all the issues that brought to us. And, we were being reminded by, people that have been in the industry for a long time about the woes of the Dutch elm disease. And so there was a lot of conversation about diversification of, your tree species. And the goal was trying to keep our tree species under 5% for any one type of tree. Ash was a huge percent population in just the Chicagoland region. And my recollection is if you look at, certain maple trees, those far exceed that. So we try not to do too many more maple trees. We do try to go with things that are more native and then a little bit of different, and just kind of look at the locations that are available for trees and to add interest in what we can do. So it's just, it's kind of an ongoing discussion amongst the staff and looking to see what, what's available and what's unique and what would be appropriate for our location. So.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. Thanks, Terry.
Yep.
Any other questions for Terry before I move on to the motion about the natatorium? Is that how you pronounce it, Terry? Natatorium? Natatorium?
Yep.
I didn't hear you.
Yeah, it is natatorium, yes. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move to the next topic, the approval of Centennial Fitness Center. Wait, I already forgot. Natatorium, HVAC repairs. So I move to approve the agreement with General Mechanical Services in the amount of $34,930 to complete the necessary repairs to the Centennial Fitness Center's Dectron unit and to authorize the executive director who shall then execute and deliver the agreement. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this? Terry, do you have anything you want to share with us on this, or?
I just want to make sure that it's brought to everyone's attention that this is a little unique because it's in excess of our bidding threshold, but there's specific reasons behind why this is permitted. Those reasons were discussed with Attorney Price and are highlighted in paragraph 4. And it basically comes down to our agreement with Pederma to mitigate our damages. So their coverage on this particular item is based on the proposals and quotes we got from contractors. So, while this is a large dollar amount, we did already expend some additional dollars on this, but our out-of-pocket cost for this repair will be $1,000 because that's what our deductible is. So.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, can we take a vote, please?
Commissioner Bendy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
Commissioner Hulting,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I will turn it back over to Ms. Leduc, where we can hopefully not talk a ton about policy this time.
Actually, no, I have nothing new to report, but I'm sure after the holidays, Gail and I can figure out what policy to go after next. So I will be passing the baton to Commissioner Coyne for the intergovernmental report.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Leduc. And I don't have very much to report at this point, except to say that the City of Park Ridge has worked out, we believe has worked out its issues with the bike path along Bussey Highway. And so that's going to, I believe, is going to proceed. Thank you to Commissioner Hulting for her diligence in monitoring this particular issue. And I will continue to have conversation with my counterparts at the city to see if we can begin some sort of dialogue about working with combining that bike path along Bussey where it affects Hinckley Park. So that wasn't a very well phrased sentence, but I hope you all understand what I'm getting at. And that's all I had to report at this time.
And just as a clarification, it isn't we don't have a date for resurfacing of Bussey, but we can still have the conversations, Matt. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great news. Thank you, Commissioner Coyne. Okay, communications and correspondence. Do we have any? No. New business. Do we have any new business?
Nope.
No. Yes. All right. I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Yes. Thank you. Nice work, staff. Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yes.
Good night.
Yeah.
Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Thanks,
Happy
Steph.
Thanksgiving.
Take care.